we're talking with Joshua Gilliland on our podcast today. He's from the podcast Legal Geek, a really cool podcast that analyzes legal matters and comic book and sci-fi matters. So, like if Spider-Man did something wrong to a villain, should we prosecute him? How would we defend him in court and stuff like that, right?
That's what we do.
So we would like to hear more about the blog and podcast.
Well, first, thank you for having me on. This is my first time doing a podcast with two people in Israel. So thank you for having me.
We're so glad you agreed.
It's, there is a time difference. So it's 10 a.m. my time. And for you guys, I know it's late. So the Legal Geeks. I am half of the founders of the Legal Geeks. My name's Joshua Gilliland. And in July of 2012, my partner Jessica Meterson and I started our blog. We had one simple mission. We're geeks, we're lawyers, and we wanted to talk about all the geeky things that we love in relation to the law. And so, where to begin? Well, Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, all the comics that we've read over the years. And we analyze those stories for their legal issues.
My first question is, where do you get the inspiration for the different cases? Does it come from your day-to-day work? Do you read a comic book and then sort of come up with an idea? How does the process work, really?
So I see things legally is probably the best way to describe. So I might be watching a TV show or reading a comic and then notice a legal issue jump out. So for example, in the original Star Trek, the motion picture, we have the Klingon battle cruisers attack the giant mysterious cloud, and they all get destroyed. And at the end, we learn that V'ger is actually Voyager 6, which was launched by the United States. Now, granted, the real Voyager program only had 2, but we'll ignore that. So what I thought about was, could the Klingon Empire sue Earth and the Federation as a successor in interest to the United States for damages caused by V'ger, which was a probe launched by the United States? That's how I think. And that's my idea of fun.
And what was the conclusion? Could they?
They could. That would first mean that the Klingons would admit a 300-year-old probe from Earth took out 3 of their battle cruisers, which they might not be willing to do. However, if they are willing to admit that, you then get into the issue of if it's products liability. There is no way that people in NASA could foresee the probe encountering a machine planet that would so augment and change it into a giant planetary killing machine. So that's well out of the realm of possibility to be foreseeable. So that would be my conclusion, that suing would be difficult.
And what do you think about the new type of lawyers from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like Daredevil, Matt Murdock, who is a defense lawyer by day and a vigilante by night, and a new series that will air on Netflix soon, I guess, She-Hulk, which is also part Hulk, part lawyer.
So it feels like my daily life being seen on the big screen. It's just like being a lawyer. No, it's not. I love those shows. I really love Daredevil and I really love She-Hulk. They're both outstanding characters, and only a handful of attorney superheroes in either Marvel or DC. And the Daredevil TV series was phenomenal. The action was great, but it did a really good job in season 1 and season 2 getting into what it means to be an attorney. Why do you practice law? And it's juxtaposed to the character Marcy, who Foggy and Murdoch went to law school with, who sells out and goes to big law. Now, granted, everyone would like to work for a law firm that's paying you under $200,000 a year, and you can pay off student loans and all that good stuff. But you don't want to sell your soul and represent morally questionable businesses that want to sue people who got cancer from working with dangerous products. It's just, that's abhorrent. And so they do a good job of taking that to the extreme and having a criminal enterprise, in this case, Wilson Fisk, also known as the Kingpin, who is pulling all these strings, doing truly evil urban development and changing Hell's Kitchen. So Murdoch in season 1 does represent the heart of a good attorney. Season 2, that's still there, but they made some big mistakes with the trial of the Punisher. And they could have had a better consultant help them, because there was just some basic trial advocacy issues that they got completely wrong. And that was frustrating. Now, turning to She-Hulk, there have been really outstanding She-Hulk series over the years. Going back to the late 80s, early 90s when John Byrne had his She-Hulk run, those were fantastic. They were funny, they broke the fourth wall with the character talking to readers from the panels. Lots of fun stuff. And then the Charles Soule series that unfortunately ended, that had a good trial. They did a really neat thing with the aged Steve Rogers and a wrongful death case from the late 1930s or early 1940s, pre-U.S. involvement in the war. And that was great. So again, love those characters. Love seeing lawyers depicted in comics.
Are there any DC lawyers? I haven't noticed any DC lawyers in comics, actually. Only Marvel.
I don't think so. On Arrow, Black Canary was a district attorney.
Right. Yeah.
I don't remember that from the comics at all. Maybe I'm wrong. But if there probably is a DC character that's an attorney. I just don't know who it is.
Well, in the end of the day, basically those characters are representative of the law on the one hand, and on the other are vigilantes, which mean they don't really abide by the law. So what do you think about the duality of that relationship?
Well, the clearest example is Daredevil, who goes around punching people, throwing them, and causing spinal injuries. And there's a couple ways to look at that. You could say it's really creative community service, but at the end of the day, it is vigilantism, and hurting people to that degree would be a felony. And if convicted, he would be instantly disbarred. Instantly. So at the time of conviction. So that's a problem with him. It also depends what they're doing. If Matt Murdock was standing on rooftops waiting to hear somebody in jeopardy and then goes to save them, that arguably would fall under the defense of others, which is the defense he could wage for saving someone from being sold into slavery, which is how the series opens after his confession. On the flip side, just going out and beating up people, that's not okay. And so it's interesting to put this on the scale towards the Punisher, who just goes around killing people. Absolutely immoral. You could see his logic, and in Daredevil season 2, I really think that was probably the best depiction of the Punisher ever that we have ever seen on screen. And I think it's part because of the actor who played Frank Castle with heart, who made him sympathetic. The graveyard scene where he explains the quote from his daughter and what his daughter meant, and having him break down and cry was powerful. It's like you could see his loss. And that hasn't been really emoted before.
We wanted to talk a little bit about the post that you publish on the blog, you or your colleagues. One of them is about Civil War, and how would you actually defend Captain America, which decides to go rogue and do whatever he likes and not pay attention to the UN and the other authorities that are trying to stop him?
So that post was done by a law student, and she wrote it in regards to the Civil War from Marvel Comics with the Registration Act and the ultimate fight with Iron Man and when Steve Rogers surrenders himself. And her name's Sylvia, and she participated in our mock trial of the Winter Soldier at San Diego Comic Fest. I steadfastly believe one day she will be elected Attorney General for the state of California. She's really, really good. And so for our Captain America celebration, when the last movie came out, we did a series of guest posts by lawyers and law students to talk about some of their favorite issues from Captain America. And Sylvia did a really nice job explaining how she would defend Cap. So charges that could have been brought against Steve Rogers in the comic would have been destruction of government property, advocating the overthrow of the government, acts of terrorism transcending national boundaries, domestic terrorism, assaulting, resisting, or impeding officers or employees of the United States, conspiracy to commit offense or defraud the United States, plus a bunch of others. Getting into the defense, she did a great job outlining the defense because she would attack it on a statutory basis, saying that it didn't apply. Self-defense is also an argument that you could do. There's also jury nullification, which, in the United States, lawyers can't outright ask the jury to ignore the law. That would get a lawyer into a lot of trouble, if not outright disbarred. You can't do that. But it happens. And so you actually do have juries say, we're not okay with punishing this person, so we're going to ignore the law and acquit him. That happens occasionally. It's not the norm. It's very, very rare. But you could make effectively a jury nullification argument to ignore the Registration Act and not prosecute Captain America. So she got into a lot of statutory analysis for each and every one of the potential crimes that could have been brought against Captain America and explained how she would defend them. Great post. If anyone wants to check it out, it was published on May 6, 2016, and it's by Sylvia La Rosa. And she is a fantastic law student, and again, I do think there will be elected office in her future.
Yeah, we'll obviously put a link to that and a link to the website and the podcast.
And another question regarding Civil War, this time specifically the movie, is the involvement of young Spider-Man in the Civil War between Iron Man and Captain America and all the other superheroes. Is it considered child endangerment?
I think yes, because Tony Stark did take Peter Parker out of the United States without disclosing to Aunt May why he was leaving the country. It's also possible that Peter Parker did not have a passport, so that means travel into Germany would be problematic. Things do get a little exciting legally because Tony arguably did have legal justification for everything that he did and wanting to stop Captain America and those who sided with Cap. So while Tony's actions would be legal, which means that everything that he had Peter Parker do would not have led to the delinquency of a minor, because none of that's a crime, it would be child endangerment, because there was no permission slip from Aunt May saying, yes, my nephew can enter Germany to engage in effectively a military raid, or at a minimum, a law enforcement raid to stop Captain America. There's no permission slip for anything like that for a minor to do. When you think back to World War II in the United States, we had a bunch of underage soldiers and sailors. And there's a famous case where a kid who was, I think, 12 or 13 got into the Navy and did some extreme heroics on the battleship he was on and was awarded a medal. And when it hit the press, his mom recognized him and contacted the Navy. And so he got discharged and, had a very complex life after that. Also married by age 16 or something crazy. But we don't want kids fighting in wars. So having a teenage Peter Parker, who's not yet 18, go overseas to fight other superheroes, arguably is child endangerment.
So I bet you're going to have a lot to write about when the movie comes out.
Yeah, there are some movies that are just like a big Christmas present. And Captain America Civil War was one of those. Whether or not Black Panther had diplomatic immunity, the constitutionality of the Accords, whether or not they even ratified the Accords. So, and then you can't have something that's unconstitutional be a treaty, because the country, the United States, will not follow it. So even if the Senate ratified a treaty that just called for something grossly illegal, it's like, we're not going to follow it. It's illegal. It's like it violates our citizens' rights. So bad stuff. But yeah, really looking forward to other movies this summer. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so I'm hoping Star Trek Beyond has a lot of good stuff. And the new Star Trek series in 2017 should have good issues. And again, one of my favorite topics to talk about is Star Wars. We've done lots of Star Wars posts. And so when Rogue One comes out, that should be a party. Because the preview begins with listing all the crimes that she has committed. That sounds like an arraignment. So it's awesome. So we're, again, lots of neat things for lawyers who are geeks to have fun with.
If we can talk about a bit more about, obviously you have guest writers. How do you divide the work? Who's writing what? Is it part of your expertise, your actual knowledge of the law in your specific field you're in? Or is it something that you love, like, let's say, Star Wars or Star Trek, and then you'll write about it? How do you divide the different cases?
Basically, a little of everything you just mentioned. So Jessica and I write a lot. And, for example, I would put myself in the category of liking a lot of the movies and the TV shows and the comics. Jessica likes a lot of the movies and the TV shows, but also the older books. Edgar Rice Burroughs and John Carter. And so, like, she's into that part of sci-fi that I have very little knowledge of. On the flip side, I do like to have different voices. So we just had a guest post about the Star Trek Anaxar fan film and the lawsuit that was taking place. And the lawyer that did the guest post, really well respected, just this amazing attorney, one of the top IP lawyers in the United States. And so when I saw the case, it's like, oh, I could talk about that and copyright and the IP issues. Or I could ask Neil, who knows way more than I do and travels the country and represents giant companies with real issues. And he wrote a brilliant guest post. So it's a mix. If somebody loves Harry Potter, I'm going to ask the Harry Potter loving attorney to do a guest post about Harry Potter. If, for example, we have an attorney who I met who lives in Utah. His name's Brad. Brad loves Arrow and Flash. And I love those shows too, but I let him do guest posts on those because I can focus on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I still take notes while watching. I'm sure I'm tons of fun with watching and having my iPad out, jotting down notes while watching. But I like to get other people to blog about the things they love.
How much time does it take for you to write blog posts to build a case?
It depends. Sometimes I've written them in a half hour. It could be a very straightforward legal issue. The facts are straightforward. And I just write, just make it happen. There are other times when I do a lot of research. It could be a more in-depth story. And like I did one of the early ones I did was assumption of risk in wearing a red shirt in Star Trek. So I spent a lot of time looking at the fireman's rule, assumption of risk, and those cases to analyze how that would play out. So again, sometimes it could be a half hour. Sometimes it could be 3 hours. It depends how much research needs to be done. But on average, 45 minutes to an hour on a blog post. Probably another half hour, 40 minutes on editing images.
Can you expand a little bit more about the specific issues that you talked about, the red shirt?
So in the old Star Trek series, the engineers and the security teams wore red. And the security teams, when they would go down to the planet with Captain Kirk They were effectively disposable characters. To add drama, you have a guy in a red shirt get impaled or turned into a cube and crushed, or something bad happens to them. And, somebody did the statistics that said on the away missions, it was something like 70% of the fatalities were red shirts on the away missions. Now, when you factor in the entire series, a lot of guys in blue shirts also get taken out. But going down to a planet, a red shirt is almost always not coming home. So we have a doctrine called assumption of risk, that if you do a job that is known to be inherently dangerous, there's a high chance you could get hurt on it. So, for example, firemen, your job is to go into burning buildings. If you're a soldier, you know that you could get shot at. So you don't file workman's comp and sue people for getting hurt on the job for that. And wearing a red shirt, when you realize, well, like 70% of these guys get killed, maybe I should make another career choice. So maybe this is the wrong life move for me. It's a bad choice.
And what were the 3 favorite pieces that you wrote or that your colleagues wrote?
Well, I did one, probably the one that I'm most famous for, is Han Solo's legal justification to shoot first. And that's probably gotten the most shares and play and views out of any blog post I've ever done. And so that's obviously the top one, because it's such a fun issue, and it's straightforward when you look at the facts of what happened with Han sitting at the table in the cantina, Guido pointing the gun at him, making a specific threat to kill Han. Han can't go anyplace. Self-defense. Absolute self-defense. Other fun ones, God, there are many. I've talked about, I've done like 450 blog posts, so it's tough. Yeah, so it's tough to go, here's the top 3. I did, it's actually a Defense of Others post on Back to the Future with George McFly was legally justified to save Elaine from Biff. With no Biff, you leave her alone. Defense of Others. It's one of the things that we don't talk about in Back to the Future, but Biff was going to rape Elaine. Everything he was doing was sexual assault. We absolutely want people to stop that. So George turning into the hero and stopping Biff and, initially getting hurt by Biff with his arm getting twisted around his back and then spinning around and decking him. Great hero moment and completely justified. So, and in something as society, we say, yes, stop that horrific conduct. Other ones, there are many Star Trek ones. I did one on after Star Trek Into Darkness on whether or not any surviving officers on the USS Vengeance could be prosecuted for being part of Admiral Marcus's conspiracy, and whether or not they could say, I was just following orders. One of the other fun ones was an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. post that the actor Clark Gregg retweeted, because I did, the rules on resurrecting Phil Coulson, were they legally right to do that? And that gets complicated because in California, we actually have rules on medical experiments. And if you're resurrecting somebody, how do you get a dead person's informed consent? Because they're dead. And that's a problem. So, what happens there? Is there an advanced health directive? Is there a do not resuscitate order? Because arguably resurrecting someone would violate a DNR. So there were great legal issues with that and had a lot of fun going down that rabbit hole. And it was super nice to wake up one morning and see that overnight Clark Gregg retweeted it with a quote, "Love this." So That was a high five moment. So,
Yeah, it sounds really cool.
yeah. He's really good to people online, and that's awesome. So, yeah. And actually, the executive producer from season 1 of Daredevil found our Daredevil posts and retweeted 2 of them with a nice note. And he's really good to people on Twitter as well. So that's neat to see that.
That's cool.
What do you think about the new arc about Captain America maybe being Hydra all along?
I hate it. I think it's a. I did a blog post on it. I find it an absolute abomination. Just horrible. And I get wanting to sell comics. I get the fact Marvel wanted to counter Rebirth, which is being done by DC. But that was the absolute worst way they could pick to do it. I don't know who in their right mind at that pitch meeting said, let's make Cap a neo-Nazi and think how will people respond to that? It's horrible.
But would you still find a way to defend him?
I think the arc should be abandoned. And, one of the, when they did Free Comic Book Day and there was issue 0, where they were going with it, with the issue of unemployment and people joining Hydra, and that was looking very interesting. And there was the Senate hearing where Steve Rogers says we should declare war on Hydra. And I'm thinking like, okay, this is a lot like the U.S. under President Jefferson taking on the Barbary pirates. I like where this is going. This is standing up to terrorism. This is fighting, something abhorrent growing in the country, because evil should be confronted. And then when issue 1 came out, there was the what the hell reaction. And because it's an abandonment. Now, there are a couple panels in there with Zemo finding the cosmic cube that's, taken the shape of a teenage girl. And so maybe it's Zemo rewriting Cap's history. But it's the wrong story to tell. I wouldn't do that. And I think what they're doing is wrong.
I want to connect this revelation that Captain America turning evil, hopefully not forever, maybe for several issues. There is another dark character, which is Darth Vader. And one of your posts was about how would you defend Darth Vader, maybe because he's under the influence of the dark side and not acting by his own choices.
Yeah, that's an interesting issue in trying to defend the redeemed Anakin Skywalker. Because I don't think he's defendable. Now, when you look back at the character's history, you can say everything he did was being manipulated by Palpatine to turn to the dark side. And when we were on Tatooine and he finds his mother dead, and then he slaughters all the Sand People, women and children alike, first off, Padme should not marry him. No one should reward that kind of conduct with marriage. So, story point 1. 2, he would have had a good insanity defense at that point in time from the loss of his mother, but he did take out an entire village. We get to Revenge of the Sith, and he makes a choice in Palpatine's office to turn against a Mace Windu and cut off his arm. Everything he did was to save Padme, and that was a choice. Killing younglings was a choice. Killing the separatists who were waiting on Mustafar was a choice. Fighting Obi-Wan Kenobi was a choice. And after getting burned and finding out that Padme's dead and being super angry, he then spends 15 to 20 years hunting down Jedi and killing a boatload of people, and then was part of the command structure that destroyed Alderaan. While he didn't give the order, that was Tarkin, he was part of the inner circle. So defending him would be tough, because I don't think for him there is a dark side made me do it defense. It would be a form of the insanity defense. I don't think there's a way around that he can be legally defended. while he is redeemed. And that is one of the beauties of Return of the Jedi, that Luke doesn't give up on Anakin. And in the revelation that maybe Return of the Jedi isn't referring to Luke, it's referring to Anakin, that he remembers who he was and makes the right decision. But at the end of the day, everything that Anakin Skywalker did as Darth Vader was a choice.
I can see a lot of similarities between Captain America and Batman vs. Superman regarding the questions they arise of the force that superheroes use, and how the rest of humanity, let's say the normal people, need to either have some ways to control it or have some kind of defense from it when it hits them.
Yeah, and it's fascinating that Captain America Civil War did a much better job at it than Batman v Superman, not only covering more issues with more substance, but also still having humor and endearing characters, and you left feeling good at the end of the movie. And that's radically different, where Batman seems way over the top. And Batman v Superman, I did a podcast about it, I did a blog post about it, and I don't think Zack Snyder understood Superman. I think Ben Affleck did a fantastic job as Batman and as Bruce Wayne. I have a problem with some of the writing that they did, because Batman's smarter than that, than to immediately place blame on Superman. And from what I read recently, they've learned from that in the Justice League movie. So there are lighter elements that are built into it, and that's a good thing. So it seems that they've responded to the criticism, and I think Ben Affleck will do a great job in the Batman movie when that comes out. But for the issue of how does society respond to superpower beings who can knock over a building, there, of course, would be laws. The issue is, what kind of laws do we write?
What kind of punishment can Superman actually get? In the end of the day, you can have a law, but he can still break it, and there will be no actual consequence, because you can't really lock him down unless you put a lot of money and effort. He could always break out. Like, he could always say, well, it's fine. It's fun that you have your laws and everything, but it does not apply to me because I don't actually have to serve time if I don't want to.
You get the Watchmen universe example, which now we find out is actually DC, and how they handled that with basically conscripting everyone or forcing people into retirement. You get, like the Marvel version in Civil War, and the DC version in the Dark Knight series that Frank Miller did. And they all have similar themes, but outright prohibiting them probably result in chaos. And strict laws probably would get complicated. Official guidelines of this is when you can act and this is when you cannot probably would be a good middle ground approach. So again, there are a variety of ways that we could shape that. So
I'd like to ask the last question. And actually, it's going back to the beginning. How did the blog start?
Oh, that's a funny story. So back in May or June of 2012, I did a blog post on e-discovery on my first blog, Bowtie Law, which I still write on. And the judge in that case, his name's John Facciola, and he's retired now, but he made a High Noon cowboy reference. And so when I did a summary of that post, I did a bunch of cowboy movie references, including Blazing Saddles and comedies. Well, my future partner, Jessica Meterson, retweeted that and made a couple comments. And after that, I thought, okay, she's quick-witted into this stuff too. So we had a couple direct messages back and forth, which led to a couple Caddyshack quotes and some others. I thought, we should blog together. And so we had a planning call, and we spent June getting ready to launch and writing a bunch of articles and recording a few podcasts. And then in July of 2012, we launched. And here we are in 2016.
It's incredible.
It's the power of Twitter.
So Joshua, thank you very much for having the time to talk to us. It was really nice to hear about all the stories and to let people in Israel know about your blog.
Thank you so much, and hope to visit one day. So thank you so much for having me and asking about the law.
Well, if you come to Israel, you have to pass the Israeli bar so you can write about Israeli law as well.
I will apply for pro hoc status, so we'll make this happen. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.